Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon, live and direct from BZ Sierra Nevada Airy in occupied California, doing the job the American media maggots won't, featuring right thinking from a left brain, working without a net and under an assassination order. Here is the Bloviating Zeppelin.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and I'm all out of bubblegum.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show, live and direct, right here, from the sumptuous and palatial SHR Media Studios, where I am broadcasting behind enemy lines in occupied California, 2 miles east of the Bill Mill, the belly of the beast, the veritable locus of evil on the entire left coast. That's the Capitol building in Sacramento, California at 10th and L Street, where nightly you can hear common sense dying. And when I get through with the show, I'll go out that door right there and I can smell the terribly noxious gases of evil, sulfur, brimstone. You got a belly up to the bar. We've kept your seat. It's great to see you back. Snowball is going to be your bartendress tonight. She pours with the best of them. Tonight, by the way, is Thursday, May 9th, the year of our Lord 2019. By the way, the lava lamp is also, in fact, lighted to my left, your right, indicating that you can watch the show on Red Sarge 1 Media, Redcon 1 Media. Go there quick like a bunny to the Facebook page, the SHR Media Facebook page, or YouTube. You can also listen and chat at shrmedia.com. Listen and chat at shrmedia.com. I invite everybody from the Big Sarge page. If you want to chat, we fixed the chat page. I can take up to 50 people right now. 50 people. 50 people. That's my money. Speaking that 50 people, you want to be in chat, come on over to shrmedia.com. I only monitor one chat room, and that is the one. So come on over to shrmedia.com. Now, it's kind of interesting. I have to tell you this. Myself and Sackhead Sean, mostly Sackhead Sean, fixed the chat roll because when our credit cards were hacked, we didn't re-up with chat roll. So when it got to 9, it went, that's it. You've reached your limit. And we also figured out what the dealio was with the telephone. The video cams, we have 3 video cams in the studio, and if you're not careful when you reset stuff, the video cams have little microphones. And if you don't turn those little microphones down, you get an echoing. And that's what I was getting. So no. It wasn't with you. It was all with me. Because, after all, if there's anything technologically inane going on, as you full well realize, it's going to be involving myself. And I got to tell you that we don't water our politics. We don't water our drinks. No, we don't water our drinks. I don't water the floor. I don't water the flower beds. But we don't water our drinks, just like we don't water our conversation. Politics, religion, crime, culture, economics, race, sex, science, law. We talk about it all right here. Here at the saloon. Nothing is sacred. The speech is free, but the booze is not. All that we ask is that you flush the don't flush the channel, damn it. Wow. Flush the toilet, jiggle the handle, and don't forget to tip your waitress. Hey, already we have Simone in chat. Welcome to Simone, the Alaskan, in chat. Welcome to the Alaskan. Oh, Mike, we got Mike in chat. And welcome to John Martin. Great to see you back. And come one, come all. If you're over at Redcon or any of the other places that I've filched for social media, please, shrmedia.com. We would love to see you in the chat room. Now, what's going to happen tonight? Crossed fingers, and maybe I've gone overboard. But I've called Professor Jones a number of times today, texted him a number of times today to make sure that he's going to be here. About 15 minutes ago, he said yes. So I'm going to rely on that. I'm going to ask him, since already Simone in chat asked if, hey, can we call in if we have any questions for Professor Jones? So when I get him on the phone, I'm going to ask him that. And then I'm pretty sure I put the phone number in chat. Yeah, there it is. The phone number is in chat because I said that if Simone wants to write it on the top of her dog with a Sharpie, the number is area code 209-284-3210. 209-284-3210. And for those of you who just tuned in, 209-284-3210. That number in Fresno is 757-23-2429-56278. Paragraph 1, subcluster 3. The 3 is silent on that. So the first hour, we're going to be talking to Professor Jones. In the second hour, I've got an SHR Media special report, which goes like this. Footsteps. The specter of William Barr, as in, oh, is it going to get good from here? Bring some popcorn. Bring a nice comfy chair. Bring your comfort chameleon. Bring any kind of an aminal. Bring any kind of an aminal that's going to make you happy, because boy, is there going to be some crap that's going to cook off here in 2019. Oh, wow. Okay, tell you what. Let's see if we can get a hold of Dr. Jones, I presume. And, hey!
A is for horses.
Professor Jones, how do you do, sir?
Pretty well. I'm sorry about last week.
That's okay. Those things happen.
I figured out what it was. My what do you call it? On the iPhone, there's something where they turn everything off. Do not disturb.
Oh,
yeah. That kicks on at 10 o'clock every night. I just now, like 5 minutes ago, I saw it turn on. I was like, oh, crap, I won't get your call again.
Oh, okay.
I had to manually turn it off, but now I know why it keeps doing that to us. So, and then I'm sitting here waiting, fat, dumb, and happy for your call and never hear it.
Yeah, and then you say, wait a minute, what's going on? That fat, evil son of a gun won't even call my damn number. Boy, am I pissed off at that guy. I understand why you're pissed off at that guy. I'm pissed off at him frequently myself. So, I already had in chat some people say, hey, once we get rolling on this, and you're going to be here for the entire first hour, once we get rolling on this, some people have said, hey, can we call in if we have any questions? So I've put the number out there, and I wanted to ask your permission first before we go ahead and do that, if that's okay.
Been a while since I took a caller, but sure.
Okay, alrighty. Now, I promised myself that the chat roll is open, lots of spaces available in the chat roll, up to 550. And we checked the phones last night. The phones should be up and working. We knew what the problem was, and we're taking care of the issue with the telephones, so everything should be all well and good. For the people from the Big Sarge network, can you give just a very brief couple-of-minute overview about who you are and how you got interested in the Constitution itself? An incredibly rare thing.
Oh, I actually read it.
There you go.
That's what made me so interested. It was like such a fascinating document, and it was created by a committee, which is a miracle. It's a proof that God exists, in my book, that the hand of providence was involved, because, can you imagine this Congress or any Congress since we've been alive, or probably any Congress in the next 20 years that could have come up with half this document, let alone this document? I look at the debacle we got with China and trade and right now, and these laws, what was that Obama tried to pass, the Obamacare? I forget the thing that they called it, but it was something like lower your medical bills.
Affordable Care Act. It was so affordable.
If you look at these things and look how many pages the Constitution would fill versus how many pages any bill Congress takes. You know, I mean, the Tax Act. Remember when Ronald Reagan came in with all those books and started slamming them on the table, and we found out that was the tax code?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you know, can you imagine this Congress trying to write a constitution? No, I'm afraid not. It is a miracle. It is a hand of providence was involved, and I began to study the Constitution because I thought how amazing it was. And what I immediately learned, Wild Bill, is that you can't study the Constitution beyond reading it. You've got the Federalist Papers and the somewhat lesser known Anti-Federalist Papers, which are both wrongly named. And then you have what? Nothing. You got court cases, stare decisis,
Right.
which is, you know, the way most colleges teach the Constitution. Stare decisis.
Precedent.
Yeah, precedent, which means it doesn't mean what the Founding Fathers were thinking when they created the country. It doesn't mean what the framers of the Constitution were thinking when they framed it. And it sure as heck doesn't mean what the people of this country who all came together and voted, those who were allowed to vote, of course, but, you know, the eligible voters of this country came together in the one and only time in our country that the sovereigns came to vote directly for something like this. We all came and voted on the Constitution. And nowhere in most colleges, 99% of colleges, will you find the study of any of those people. All you'll find is what a whole bunch of Supreme Court appointees, Supreme Court appointees have decided the Constitution meant all on their own. And if anything since Ronald Reagan is proof of just how political that is instead of how constitutional it is, you know, and that's what they're supposed to be deciding, right? But we know it's all political. Will they vote for abortion or not? That's the major thing and I'm not quite sure how that should even be an issue for a Supreme Court justice's appointment. But to get back on track, I started digging up and finding newspaper articles of people that were just writing into the newspapers of their day, the Philadelphia Gazette, etc., and writing about the proposed Constitution. I started reading about the descriptions of people carrying boats down the streets, signifying pro-constitutional rallies and victory and whatnot. And, you know, we don't know any of these kind of things today. And I read the debates on the Constitution, which were actually some notes were taken on the debates of the Constitution, and Hamilton, those guys. And so that began my fascination with the Constitution and what form of government we have. And I guess somewhere along the line, someone dubbed me an expert. But as you know, an expert, an X is a has-been, and a spurt's a little drip under pressure.
Let me say this. There are three things, if I've learned nothing else from you, it's these three things. And item number 3 that I'm going to enumerate, I'd like you to comment on. The first thing I learned is that we are a constitutionally federated republic. I always think about it in terms of CFR. CFR. We are a constitutionally federated republic. The second thing that I will never forget until the day I die, and then thereafter I'll never forget it too, is that our rights are not granted to us by government. Our rights are granted to us by God. Simple.
Right.
And then the third thing that I was kind of astounded, but I'd like you to comment on, is when people are taught con law anymore, they're taught by way of stare decisis in terms of precedent, but they teach nothing about the history of the Constitution or the Bill of Rights. I do not possibly see how those two things do not go hand in hand. How can that be?
Well, let me touch real quick. Number 2, rights come from God. That means that your rights can't be taken from you by man. They can be thwarted, they can be circumvented, but they cannot be taken from you.
Yes.
And that's an important concept, especially, I think, today, where it looks like we're starting to lose more and more rights. No, we're not losing them. We're just losing our access to them, and we're not fighting for them. We're allowing someone else to block our access to those rights. Now, I went to Texas Wesleyan for my bachelor's. I got a BS in poli-sci there. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can.
Okay. So I went and got a BS in poli-sci at Texas Wesleyan. And one of the things that made me want to go to that school was it required 2 semesters of constitutional law, whereupon I almost got kicked out about 20 times.
Really?
Oh, my goodness, yes. I caused quite a lot of problems. In fact, I had a couple of meetings with the dean, and I was told in no uncertain terms that I would complete the class and do so with a minimum of interruption for the rest of the students who are there to learn. In other words, by trying to learn about the Constitution was thwarting all the other students who, according to the dean, had paid to be in that class to learn about the Constitution. And when I pointed out that we had learned zero about the Constitution, all we had learned about is a whole bunch of decisions the Supreme Court made about it.
Yes.
I was informed that that was exactly how the Constitution is taught across the country, and that would be the way it would be taught, and that would be the way I would learn. And I got in a lot of trouble because I said that I was, for a very short, brief stint, the Wesleyan Rambler. I was an op-ed writer, and I wrote several op-eds about things from axe murderesses to, I don't know, the Constitution. And in one of my articles, I made a comment that Texas Wesleyan managed to take the Constitution out of constitutional law. And it was spiked, and I was fired.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I was told in no uncertain terms that I was too conservative for a North Texas in Tarrant County, the reddest state, the reddest county in Texas. And our private Texas Wesleyan, and it is a Baptist university, conservative Southern Baptist University.
Yeah.
I was too conservative for it, and it blew my mind. Now, I want to say that my professor there, Dr. Saloon, was a mentor to me, and he was probably about as commie as you could get, but he was never, ever, ever unfair to me.
Okay.
He was amazing professor. And one of the complaints, and I bring this up because, and this is kind of funny. I don't think I've ever told anybody these stories before, but
we're virgins.
Yeah, well, I guess so. I never even brought this up on my show when I had it. He told me once that he was getting a lot of complaints from other students that I was turning this into a postdoctoral class when it was a undergraduate class, any of the classes I was in with him, because it turned into him and me debating the whole class, and me defending my position against the entire class, of libtards. And I thought at first how unfair it was, and I was angry. And so I developed a strategy that I would be so obnoxiously conservative that if I got anything less than an A, I would scream, bloody murder.
Yeah.
That they were punishing me. What I didn't realize, I did realize after the first class with Saloon, was that he could care less what my politics were. I just had to be able to defend my position. And he was more than happy to go rounds with me and teach me, and he was smart as a whip. So I really, really got my constitutional training at Texas Wesleyan, not from the constitutional law class, but from my plain old political science professor in whatever class he was, stuck with me in. Because I just kept asking question after question about it. But, you would be surprised at how different an opinion you would have on what everything in the Constitution says. And I mean everything in what the Constitution says. If you read what was written at the time the Constitution was written and debated and voted and ratified.
Yeah, if you had it in some kind of an historical context. See, why would you not want to learn more about the document in the class that you're allegedly the ultimate class in study? That doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, you would think. But I survived it. I think I got an A in it, maybe a B. I can't remember. I think they get it just to shut me up and make me so I did not have any reason to come back and complain. The only other time I ever saw a dean, baseball legend Hargrove, remember him?
Yes.
From the Texas Rangers?
Yep.
Well, he was the dean of the school when I first got there. And it was really funny. They brought me in, and I this is embarrassing, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you the story.
Okay.
Because it's funny.
All right.
Yeah. He had me in, and he says, why won't you take any of these classes? And he had a sheet of paper, with a whole bunch of classes that I just told the registrar I refused to take, that I'd rather take other electives, that had to do with, with political science, constitution, things I wanted to study. But I refused to take any fine arts or liberal arts classes. And anyway, the short story is that I didn't understand what the word liberal arts meant. I was stuck on liberal, and I was like, nah, screw that. And so he had to explain to me how the Founding Fathers had created liberal arts to make a wholesome, broad-based education so that we could go out and defend the Constitution. And he started showing me statements from Adams and Franklin and others with those exact words in their mouths, that a liberal arts degree was necessary for the freedom of man. And that's why the Founding Fathers were so, bent out on creating education and making sure that every town was squared off, and there would be a section for a federal building, one for a church, and one for a school. And believe it or not, there was an order they had to be built in: church, school, and federal building in each township square. And, and so today we have these public schools which, regurgitate propaganda against the Constitution, but they were actually designed to teach people about freedom and education and the sacrifices that were made. And that's why they had the Pledge of Allegiance and things like that in the class. Of course, that came a long time after the Founding Fathers, but the concepts were still there, about, if you go back and you look at some of the textbooks or tests from kids in the 1800s, I guarantee you, none of us are going to pass them, because there's questions in there, like there was a test I saw in 1890, and it was in the Battle of Antietam.
Okay.
Which general led what forces down, Breeds Hill or whatever, it's like, what? Good Lord. Okay, I remember the Battle of Antietam. I couldn't tell you what year it was. I couldn't tell you who won. I couldn't tell you any of that. Mostly because that's out of the area of my expertise. But still, as a regular Joe Q citizen, I couldn't tell you that. And that was like a 7th grade test. That question that I just told you. But anyway, so let's just Second Amendment. Okay, I know that's near and dear to a lot of people's hearts.
It's funny you should mention that. What I'd like to do about the Second Amendment is I have an article in front of me from the NewYorkMag.com, New York Magazine, and it's called The Intelligencer, and I'd like to read the article to you because I know immediately you're going to disagree, but I want folks to hear your input on this article and how, in my opinion, way too many people get things wrong. So, folks, you have to consider this is coming from the NewYorkMag.com. And I should also tell you that prominently displayed is Justice Stevens on this. So again, that gives you a little bit of an inkling as to the viewpoint of the author, whose name is Ed Kilgore. The title of it is, "Not So Long Ago, the Second Amendment Didn't Guarantee the Right to Own a Gun." Would you disagree, or would you agree or disagree just with that title?
Oh, I would agree.
Okay.
The Second Amendment does not guarantee you the right to have a gun.
Okay. Let me go further into the article.
Sure.
And then it says, in the minds of most gun enthusiasts, the idea that the Second Amendment was consciously designed by the founders as a bedrock right to hoard shooting irons, either for self-protection or to overthrow future, quote, now it's in quotes, tyrants, unquote, is beyond question. But as retired Supreme Court Justice John Paul Stevens reminds us today, the personal right to bear arms is a premise of constitutional law that's actually less than a decade old. So would you tend to agree with that?
Okay, did I hear you right that the Second Amendment to defend our right to bear arms is only a decade old?
He says specifically, as retired Supreme Court Justice John Paul Stevens reminds us today, the personal right to bear arms as a premise of constitutional law is actually less than a decade old.
Okay, now, this may be that Stevens is referring to the fact that the Supreme Court made some decision, I can't remember that one, the right or whatever it is. There's a decision they made about a decade ago, and he's probably referring to that.
Okay, are you
but
you talking about
leading and saying it? But yeah, I think that's what he's thinking. Is the Supreme Court weighed in just recently, and that's probably what he's thinking about.
Okay, my first thought was Heller versus D.C., but I'm going to get down to that. The author writes, for over 200 years after the adoption of the Second Amendment, it was uniformly understood as not placing any limit on either federal or state authority to enact gun control legislation. In 1939, the Supreme Court unanimously held that Congress could prohibit the possession of a sawed-off shotgun because that weapon had no reasonable relation to the preservation or efficiency of, quote, a well-regulated militia. Do you tend to agree or disagree with that?
Oh, that's balderdash. First off, it's not what the Constitution says. It's what a Supreme Court justice said. And second,
yes.
And second, nothing in there. There's no test of what is necessary. It simply says Congress shall make no law. So, if you can get past that, then you can do whatever you want.
The article continues by saying that precedent held until June of 2008, when by a 5-4 margin in the case of District of Columbia v. Heller, the court finally recognized a right to civilian firearm ownership for self-protection. John Paul Stevens wrote the main dissenting opinion in that case, which featured this argument. I'm going to read it to you, and I'm going to ask you to weigh in on his argument. John Paul Stevens' argument was, neither the text of the amendment nor the arguments advanced by its proponents evidenced the slightest interest in limiting any legislature's authority to regulate private civilian use of firearms. Specifically, there is no indication that the framers of the amendment intended to enshrine the common law right of self-defense in the Constitution. Would you tend to agree or disagree with that?
Well, it depends on how you look at it. If you look at it through stare decisis, he's correct. If you look at it through the way I told you, then no, he's wrong.
The lens of history. Okay, we're at the bottom of the hour. We're going to have to go to a break. We're going to come back. I want to read the rest of the article about the Second Amendment because you were going to go there anyway. And then after we get through the article, what I'd like to do is throw the phone lines open to folks who are interested in calling in and speaking to Professor Michael Jones, who is a constitutional scholar and has spent quite some time studying the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Federalist Papers, the Anti-Federalist Papers, et al. So we're going to take a break, and we'll be back. We're going to talk about the Second Amendment, and if you guys have any questions for Professor Jones, you can call in. You're listening to the Bloviating Zeppelin right here, live and direct on the SHR Media Network. Oh, by the way, it's the Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show. Oh, yeah, that's right.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Hey, this is Michael Wright.
And I'm Shannon Wright.
Join us for The Right Way with Shannon and Mike, Monday through Thursday from 7 to 9 a.m. right here on SHR Media.
Why are they joining us?
For fun things like sports, politics.
Oh, maybe some news and entertainment?
And all kinds of other things.
Money and recipes and events, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, so join us Monday through Thursday, 7 to 9 a.m. here on shrmedia.com.
From a public locker inside a dilapidated Long Island rail station comes a show designed to piss off liberals using truth, facts, and ridicule. The Lid Radio Show, featuring the conservative voice from the People's Republic of New York, the Lid himself, Jeff Dunitz. Tune in every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific on the SHR Media Network. Go to shrmedia.com. At Lid Radio, we fight for the truth, justice, and a good kosher T-bone. If you don't listen, Hillary Clinton might sneak into your bedroom in her housecoat late at night and blame you for her election loss. It's the Lid Radio Show with Jeff Dunitz.
Hey girls, Carry Girl Gear is here. More and more women every day are concealed carrying, participating in competitive shooting, and getting firearms training. It's not a boys' club anymore, and we don't have to shop in their stores anymore either. Finally, a cool and unique clothing line just for women. Dope tees and hats for the patriotic concealed carry and 2A girl. So what are you waiting for? Go check out carrygirlgear.com today.
It's your business diva here, Melanie Collette. I am inviting you to a front row seat as I discuss some of the most intriguing details of wealth and finance with today's movers and shakers in the world of business. Listen in and discover financial truths on a global, domestic, and household scale. Uncover topics that will impact your wallet today and in the future. Money Talk with Melanie airs Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. East, 2 p.m. West, right here on SHR Media and High Plains Pundit Talk Radio. You can't afford to miss it.
The new show on the SHR Media Network, Sackheads Against Tyranny. On shrmedia.com. Go there quick like a bunny, 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific every Wednesday. Live and direct on the SHR Media Network. shrmedia.com. Be there.
For 50 years, I've seen the American people blinded by corrupt politicians, a lapdog media, and deceptive Islam. The one thing the elites fear is one man with a cane. I'm Dave Milner. Join me through Spreaker, iTunes, and SoundCloud, through SHR Media and the Western Free Radio Network, for half a century of experienced perspective on political and social issues, weekly on The Unpleasant Blind Guy. And catch me on Jeff Mitchell's EDL Radio on blogtalkradio.com. There's
no surrender, ever.
Because truth is not always pleasant.
Broadcasting behind enemy lines in occupied California, a mere 2 miles from the state capital, the bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show can be heard every Tuesday and Thursday night at 8 p.m. Pacific and 11 p.m. Eastern, only on the SHR Media Network. Go to shrmedia.com to listen. You can also watch on the SHR Media Facebook page and the SHR Media YouTube channel. No goldfish were abused in the making of this ad. Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, thanks for listening to the bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show, live and direct right here from the SHR Media Network. For the full hour, we have Professor Michael Jones on the air. We were talking about the Second Amendment. I have an article that I'd like to finish reading because I'm enjoying having Professor Jones weigh in on the article regarding the Second Amendment. And then once we finish here, already some people have asked me a couple of questions in chat. And then again, if you want to call in with a question for Professor Jones, the number is area code 209-284-3210. 209-284-3210. So we're going to finish this article, and I'm going to continue because it was referencing John Paul Stevens and his major dissent in D.C. versus Heller, essentially. It wasn't until, the author, by the way, continues by saying it wasn't until 2010, in the case of McDonald versus Chicago, that another 5-4 Supreme Court majority determined that its novel interpretation of personal civilian gun rights would be binding on the states via the 14th Amendment. Again, Stevens wrote the principled dissent, arguing that even if there's some personal right to bear arms outside the militia context, it's hardly the sort of liberty interest that requires its imposition on the states. So he goes on to write, the treatment of the subject is far, far away from the standard conservative treatment of the Second Amendment as the most fundamental right of them all, extending not just to sawed-off shotguns Congress was regulating in 1939, to all sorts of military and quasi-military weapons. In general, is this author on the right track, or is he full of crap?
Oh, it's full of crap. Look, who wrote the Second Amendment? Just real quick, who wrote the Second Amendment?
Specifically, I do not. Well, yes, the framers in general,
of the
right?
Constitution,
yes.
Right? Okay. Now, Hamilton promised that the Constitution was ratified on Hamilton's word that the Bill of Rights would be introduced. The Bill of Rights was introduced by Hamilton, so mostly it was written by Hamilton. There are other authors involved in the Second Amendment, and forgive me, I used to be able to just tell you, but right now I'm talking to you off the top of my head extemporaneously.
Okay.
Okay. But these men fought a war against England. Now, let me tell you something that may shock most of your listeners. Did you know that there was a machine gun during the Revolutionary War? And I'm not talking about the Gatling. There was an actual bona fide machine gun during the Revolutionary War.
I was aware of the Civil War, but no, not the Revolutionary War.
Oh yeah. Go look it up. It's not apocryphal. There really was a machine gun back then. I don't remember too many of the details about it. It wasn't very accurate. It only shot like 10 rounds, and it shot them everywhere, and it wasn't any better than a Brown Bess musket for accuracy. But,
here we go. I have the name of it. It's called a puckle gun, Puckle.
That's it.
A puckle gun.
Puckle, yeah. I was going to tell you pickled, and I thought, I better not say that because it sounds wrong. But yeah, puckle gun. So, okay, so the Founding Fathers could not conceive of a machine gun like an AR-15 today. Well, bull crap. They did. Yeah, they had one, the puckle gun. So, okay, all right. So they knew of machine guns. They knew of muskets. They knew of rifles. When they went to war, people brought mortars out of their front yards. Mortars. All right? Can you imagine having a mortar today? Go out there and shoot off a grenade somewhere? No. These guys had mortars. They had cannons. They had rifles. They had, everything that was modern of its time. And we'll put to bed the myth that the Founding Fathers couldn't conceive of machine guns, since they all were aware of them. And they also were aware of bow and arrows and catapults and trebuchets and all that other crap, too. So, Greek fire, they had all the knowledge of modern military science at its time. And they were not afraid of it for the people to have it, because that's how they won the war. The people dug it out of their own yards, their own backyards, their own closets, and they went to war against the British. Well, against the British. So I have a problem with thinking that the Founding Fathers wouldn't write that. But now, if you go and you look at the writings of the Founding Fathers and the framers, I keep saying Founding Fathers. I should probably redirect and just say framers. But Adams and others weighed in on the Constitution. And some of the comments were like, the Second Amendment was not necessary because no one would be so stupid as to limit the right of people's rights to bear arms. And that if you put it in the Constitution, people might think that it guaranteed the right to bear arms as opposed to that right coming from God. That's where I started to understand where our rights came from. God. God gives us the right to protect ourselves because he, in fact, gave us life, and we are to preserve it at all cost. So we have a right to protect ourselves and our loved ones and our nations, etc., etc. And therefore, we have a right to have the most modern military weapons there are. If I want a freaking tank, I can have a freaking tank in my driveway. And you know what? Back in the 50s, when people had parades in the 50s and 60s, do you remember Sherman tanks piling up and down the street?
I can remember that, yes.
Yeah, we did not run in fear. We cheered. We wanted to be on them so bad ourselves, that we'd have given our teeth to ride those things. But nowadays, people are afraid of tanks. Oh, my God, can you imagine someone owning a tank? Well, the people who owned all those Sherman tanks, I don't remember ever seeing one story where someone went crazy and drove through town tearing up buildings or shooting anybody with them.
No, it was really bizarre. We had a guy across the street from us, the Vidas. He owned a whole host of Model A's, Model T's, etc., and he had a World War II tank that the kids in the neighborhood went crazy over, and that he would actually drive on the street in the 50s. That's wacky.
Yeah.
Hey, John in the chat room has a question. He can't call in, but he has a question. And he says, what I want to...
Before we move to the question, did I answer what you want from that? Because, you see, it's right. The Second Amendment does not guarantee your right to bear arms. God does. And the framers in their debates made it clear that, A, we had a right to our self-defense and weapons, and B, we also needed a militia to preserve the Constitution and the country because they did not think standing armies were that great an idea. Okay, done.
But now that gives people an insight into this, to me, is another reason, another indicator as why you meaning leftist colleges, etc., when they're teaching con law, don't want to include anything about the history in this, because the history leads you to God, which leads you away from government being in control of your life, etc. So, yeah, the clouds, you have a right to self-defense. Well,
and this is how Republican appointee Stevens can say that there was no history involved. And that, by history, he means history of the Supreme Court. He does not mean history of any of the framers of the Constitution.
Correct.
Now, there were some people who did not think it was a good idea to have guns. There were a lot of people who thought back then that maybe we should take all guns away and end war. You know, and you're always going to have that, you know, fruitopia around. You know, you live in California, you know what I'm talking about.
Oh, but, God.
Right. But still, you know, men are evil, some, and as long as there are evil men, there need to be nothing, good men do nothing to allow evil men to prevail, as Jefferson says. So, all right, question from the where?
From the chat room. John can't call in, but he has a question in the chat room. He says, okay, yes. What I'd like to know is why the Second Amendment says, quote, shall not be infringed. And yet, that is what they constantly do by putting restrictions and limitations on it. So his point is, shall not be infringed appears to be a catch-all for just about everything.
Yes. First off, let me say this. If you want me to answer questions and stuff, it takes time.
Sure, you bet.
I can stay until for 40 minutes after the second hour if you want me to stay in the second hour. But if you have something else, then I'll say goodbye when time's done. It's up to you.
Okay.
But I can make myself available.
I've got a project that I've got to start at the top of the hour, so we've got another 15 minutes. So,
okay,
so once we've got the question, though, yeah, I'd like...
Some of the things the Constitution say this: Congress shall make no law, or it says that it shall not be infringed. And like I said a few minutes ago, if you can get past that, you can do anything. Groucho Marx is famous for saying, once you can fake sincerity, you can do anything. And that's one of my favorite jokes.
It's true.
And right. And so here we go. It says that it shall not be infringed, which means that Congress shall not. Now, there was a debate that the states at the time could infringe on the Second Amendment because it did not say the states could not infringe. It said Congress shall not infringe. And that was how the Bill of Rights was understood. it wasn't until the Republicans came in there and gummed up everything with all the post-Civil War amendments, and the Supreme Court backed them up by saying that the states would have to comply with some of the amendments, but not all of them, and that it would know when they should and when they shouldn't. And to this day, there is no list of what amendments states must comply with along with the central government, but the Supreme Court has that choice because we allowed them to do that, to stare decisis. So anyway, it's quite simple, the Second Amendment. And then you've got the stupid idiots who come in with the comma,
Yes,
and they want to debate English with you. A well-regulated militia, comma, be a necessary to security of a free state, comma, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, comma, shall not be infringed. What they're saying here is we need a militia to protect the Constitution in this country so that we can stay free. And in order for that to happen, we need a militia because we don't want a standing army. And we also want the people of this country to be able to keep and bear arms to keep that freedom as well, so they can keep their own freedom. When the government has to go door to door and gun to gun, they're less likely to violate your rights than if they can just rule from on top of Mount Olympus and tell you everything you have to do without fear that they may be hurt back. Several of the framers point out pointedly from Jefferson on that the Second Amendment is here to protect us from government, from tyranny of our own government, not just foreign, but domestic. And you don't get that stare decisis. You only get that if you read what the framers and the debaters and the ratifiers say.
This article then goes into, which I think is the clear key paragraph of the whole thing. And then, folks, if you want to call, the number 209-284-3210. Give us a blast. This is a very telling quote that I did not recognize or realize was Justice Stevens' thought patterns. He says, Stevens understands how much water has gone over that particular dam in the years since the Heller decision. And so what he is doing now is he is advocating, Justice Stevens, retired, is now advocating a constitutional amendment to remove the Second Amendment altogether as a relic of the 18th century that is enabling gun violence.
Well, my dog doesn't like that.
Yeah, because it won't hunt.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that is, it's funny. If we were to repeal the Second Amendment, I'm here to tell you that does not repeal your right to bear arms. You have the right from God. You do not have the right from government to bear arms. Now, can they suppress that? Sure. They can use force and duress. That's what tyranny is. A free people should never have to, should always fear their government, but a legitimate government should never have to fear its free people. And the reason for that is a free people will not mess with a government that is legit.
The California State Senate on Thursday approved it.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
What was that?
Oh, that's okay. It was something that bled through. Go ahead.
A legitimate government that is honoring the freedoms and rights of its citizens will not have to fear its citizens, but its citizens will always have to fear a government going tyrannical. And that's why we have to watch it and be aware of it and to be able to protect against it. So it's just plain simple. What this is the left is afraid of being shot for their stupidity, for their tyranny. I mean, look at history. What happens? We rise up against tyrants. Oh, well, they're tyrants, and they're afraid of it. And I hate to say this, it's not just the Democrats. This is the left on the right, too, if you get my drift.
No,
the Republicans have
you bet.
communists in their party. Yeah.
Exactly. There's another issue. We got about 10 more minutes left. I think we can probably handle this. Folks, if you do want to call in, the line is open. So if you have any question, give me a blast, and I'll see that you're calling in. In the meantime, here's what I think is going to be a huge issue in the immediate future. My understanding is that besides California, okay, there we go, California. Besides California, there are 7 states that are attempting to do this. So I want to run the story by you and then ask you its constitutionality. This is from thehill.com. It says California Senate passes bill that would keep Trump off the 2020 ballot unless he releases his tax returns. So my question to you would be, I understand if various states and cities want to have control over local elections. That's how they get away with allowing illegals to vote in local elections. But how is it, this is my question for you, Professor Jones, how is it that various states can hold sway, or can they, over a federal presidential election and disallow a specific candidate to appear on a ballot for a federal election?
Well, I don't see how the FEC would allow that bias. Now, there is no requirement anywhere in the Constitution, let alone the Federal Elections Commission rules and laws on holding elections across the country. There are no restrictions on tax records.
Okay.
And it used to be that they were never presented.
Yes.
Until recently, this is a recent phenomenon, and when it happened, it pissed me off. I can't remember who did it, Carter or somebody did it, and to show fairness or whatever.
I think that may have gone back to Nixon.
Well, it could be. It could be. But ever since I became politically aware of it, it pissed me off because we have no business looking at people's tax records. Those are private.
Yes.
And, they were leaked recently, last election or two. There were some leakages of tax records of political officials, people running. The IRS has been weaponized and used by Obama's administration against people.
Yes, that is clear.
But I don't see how the Uniform Election Code can allow 7 states to ban Trump being on the ballot simply because he won't release his tax records. I mean, then what's the next demand? All of his business records and dealings and.
That's already, yes, you're absolutely right. That is already at issue. In the state of New York, that is already at issue. You're correct.
Now, listen to this. It does state in the Constitution that you must be a U.S. citizen. And we couldn't get the government to make Obama produce a birth certificate. And there was a lot of guessing of where he was born and debate and strife. And somewhere, someone should have said, you know what, instead of worrying about tax records, how about we produce a birth certificate? Because, that is a requirement. And a state says you can't produce a birth certificate. I don't see why they can't say, well, if you can't prove that you're a U.S. citizen, which is a constitutional requirement, and you can't prove you're, over 35 or whatever, and you have, lived in your state an X number of years, then you can't be on our ballot. That would be constitutional. But to come up with something else, like, you can't produce a Social Security card, or you can't produce your tax records, or you can't show all your TiVo listings, then, library books, it's just amazing. When I was in the military, I had a high clearance. They warned us about using the public libraries and stuff and renting videos because people could track that stuff. And then they could use it against us. And when we came up with our, what were they called, 398 checks, our classified rechecks every year.
Okay.
That was one of the things they put in front of us, was our library lending paperwork and the video rentals from Blockbuster and whatnot, and restaurants we ate at, and all that crap was thrown in front of us, to defend. But can you imagine that a state just is like, well, now he's got his tax records, what else are we going to force? Pretty soon, only the worst elements will run, and all the documents will be faked or scrubbed, or I don't understand our country at all about this stuff. And it's no more constitutional than it is those idiot states, which probably includes California too, that are going to force their electoral colleges to vote the way they want.
Yes.
As opposed to, yes. So that's just as unconstitutional.
There's, okay. It's really funny you should mention that, because there's an article from NBC News that swears that the Supreme Court's census decision could hand control of the Electoral College to Republicans, that hundreds of billions of dollars of federal funding hang in the balance, as well as the outcome of many federal elections from 2022 to 2030. Now, folks in chat and or you, Michael Jones, are going to have to tell me, I don't think this has been ruled yet by the Supreme Court. Has the Supreme Court come out with a ruling with regard to the census question the number of illegals in your household, counting them, et cetera, in the new census? We used to ask the question. I realize that, and I know it went up to the Supreme Court, but I can't remember if the decision has come down as to whether that's lawful or not.
I don't recall reading anything about that. There was a period I was unplugged. If it went through then. Okay. But because I haven't heard anything scary about
I
that.
haven't heard of that.
And here, I've got a suggestion.
Okay.
Why don't we start counting illegal aliens at 3/5?
Wow. Okay. That would go over like the proverbial turd in the punch bowl.
Right. But that's kind of funny, I think. And the funny thing is so many people don't know that 3/5 clause didn't mean black people were only worth 3/5 a person. It was the Republicans' victory over the Democrats into limiting them being able to count slaves so that they could get higher proportions of the census, so that they could get more representatives in Congress, so that they could force slavery to remain. And that was a Republican trick to try and limit Southern Democrat power so that they could prevent slavery from continuing. I
got a question for you. And we got about 2 minutes to go before the top of the hour.
Okay.
I could swear that I heard you on a radio show, and it sounded like it was your radio show. Are you back on the radio?
No, not that I know of.
Okay. It sounded like it was perhaps sometime this week, or maybe I just heard a replay, but it sounded like you were in charge, and so I was curious if your radio show has come back.
No, I'm working on it, but I haven't pulled the plug yet, because I spend about 3 8-hour days a week at the VA right now because of my health problems.
Oh, okay.
And so I've got to conquer that first. I am literally looking at about 50 bottles of pills in front of me. I feel like Jimmy Carter here with all these pill bottles, but I'm fighting my health right now and trying to survive. And when I do, then I'm going to come back and start radio again.
That'd be great.
I had it's kind of weird you mentioned it, because the other day I got some kind of thing in one of my text messages that said I had so many replays of my broadcasts. I was like, oh, wow. I haven't broadcast in a year, and people are still listening to me. That's kind of sad.
No, I think it's kind of cool, actually. As per normal,
it is.
Can we have you back again?
Yeah.
Okay.
Anytime.
Great. I'd love to do that. And the other thing that I'd really like to do, since you already mentioned it, and I'm sticking it in the old BZ tickler file, is I would love to get my copy of the Federalist Papers over here and kind of go over the Federalist Papers with you, because I think there are tons of questions that I have about that, and there are tons of things that the people do not know and clearly have not read the Federalist Papers, and I think it adds so much more when you add that on top of the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution itself. It really gives you a nice, nuanced layering and a great insight into the Founding Fathers and how brilliant they truly were.
And you forgot one very important thing. We have 4 organic documents to our government, and that's the Northwest Ordinance.
Oh, okay. All right. Great. Outstanding.
You got to have all 4.
Okay.
And, like I said, you can't read the 10th Amendment without reading the 9th Amendment. You can't read the Constitution without reading the Declaration of Independence. And you can't understand our government if you don't understand the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and the Northwest Ordinance. And that's one of the most forgotten documents on the planet, I think.
I would tend to agree. And I'll tell you what, I'm guilty.
Yes, sir.
I haven't read it. Guilty as charged.
Well, not really relevant much anymore, but it was a good document. It did try to end slavery, and it set up a lot of good stuff about this country. But anytime you want to talk about that, you just tell me and I'll pop that in.
Okay, great, folks.
Probably have to give me a little warning on that one. I'll probably have to reread it. Most of the stuff I can do off the top of my head.
I will provide sufficient warning. So, folks, that was Professor Michael Jones. Thanks for being here for the entire hour. I greatly appreciate it. We're going to take a break, be right back, and I'm going to go directly into the SHR Media Network special report. Footsteps. There are a lot of footsteps, and the specter of William Barr.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Hey, this is Michael Wright.
And I'm Shannon Wright.
Join us for The Right Way with Shannon and Mike, Monday through Thursday from 7 to 9 a.m. right here on SHR Media.
Why are they joining us?
For fun things like sports, politics.
Oh, maybe some news and entertainment?
And all kinds of other things.
Money and recipes and events, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, so join us Monday through Thursday, 7 to 9 a.m. here on shrmedia.com.
From a public locker inside a dilapidated Long Island rail station comes a show designed to piss off liberals using truth, facts, and ridicule. The Lid Radio Show, featuring the conservative voice from the People's Republic of New York, the Lid himself, Jeff Dunitz. Tune in every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific on the SHR Media Network. Go to shrmedia.com. At Lid Radio, we fight for the truth, justice, and a good kosher T-bone. If you don't listen, Hillary Clinton might sneak into your bedroom in her housecoat late at night and blame you for her election loss. It's the Lid Radio Show with Jeff Dunitz.
Hey girls, Carry Girl Gear is here. More and more women every day are concealed carrying, participating in competitive shooting, and getting firearms training. It's not a boys' club anymore, and we don't have to shop in their stores anymore either. Finally, a cool and unique clothing line just for women. Dope tees and hats for the patriotic concealed carry and 2A girl. So what are you waiting for? Go check out carrygirlgear.com today.
It's your business diva here, Melanie Collette. I am inviting you to a front row seat as I discuss some of the most intriguing details of wealth and finance with today's movers and shakers in the world of business. Listen in and discover financial truths on a global, domestic, and household scale. Uncover topics that will impact your wallet today and in the future. Money Talk with Melanie airs Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. East, 2 p.m. West, right here on SHR Media and High Plains Pundit Talk Radio. You can't afford to miss it.
The new show on the SHR Media Network, Sackheads Against Tyranny. On shrmedia.com. Go there quick like a bunny, 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific, every Wednesday. Live and direct on the SHR Media Network. shrmedia.com. Be there.
For 50 years, I've seen the American people blinded by corrupt politicians, a lapdog media, and deceptive Islam. The one thing the elites fear is one man with a cane. I'm Dave Milner. Join me through Spreaker, iTunes, and SoundCloud, through SHR Media and the Western Free Radio Network, for half a century of experienced perspective on political and social issues, weekly on The Unpleasant Blind Guy. And catch me on Jeff Mitchell's EDL Radio on blogtalkradio.com. There's
no surrender, ever.
Because truth is not always pleasant.
Broadcasting behind enemy lines in occupied California, a mere 2 miles from the state capitol, the bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show can be heard every Tuesday and Thursday night at 8 p.m. Pacific and 11 p.m. Eastern, only on the SHR Media Network. Go to shrmedia.com to listen. You can also watch on the SHR Media Facebook page and the SHR Media YouTube channel. No goldfish were abused in the making of this ad. Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's the second hour right here on the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show. My gracious thanks to Professor Michael Jones, who's kind enough to come on any old time. I'd like to make an announcement, and then we're going to go directly into the SHR Media Special Report. And I want to run something by you. Now, I know it tanked like crazy last Tuesday, but what I'd like to start, perhaps, is Open Line Tuesday, so that if anybody has any, wants to call in for whatever reason whatsoever, that you can call in. The same number, 209-284-3210. If you're interested, let me know in chat or on Twitter. I'm on Twitter at BZEP, at BZEP. I'd like to kind of get into a thing of opening up the lines and then figuring out I might be able to conference people and people could talk to each other as they talk to me and listen to the audio cuts, etc. Just throwing something like that up in the air. For the rest of the hour, there's some stuff coming on. I should say there's some stuff that's going to be happening very shortly. And this country is going to be very, very affected. And that's why I created tonight's.
This is an SHR Media Network special report.
I got to tell you this, I can hear them, can't you? I'll wager there are any number of persons in if you're in D.C., if you're in this area, you know these areas very well. I'll bet there are any number of people in D.C., Brandywine, Alexandria, Silver Spring, Bethesda, Falls Church, Reston, Rockville, College Park, Great Falls, McLean, Chevy Chase, North Arlington, and Georgetown, amongst many, many, many other locales whose personal radar has emerged, and it's sounding bells and claxons in a fashion heretofore never experienced. I can hear them, and I think they can too, and those are footsteps. Furthermore, can you not sense this? The smell of fear. Sweaty, clammy, dripping rivulets of sweat coursing down the back, staining people's armpits, moistening the crotch, invading the breath, gathering on a forehead. It's become endemic, I bet, in the Northeast. It's a sour, cloying, inescapable sweat and a smell permeating the offices of, luckily, thankfully, many bureaucrats in D.C., male and female. It is the abject smell of fear. And it's also the smell of emptying bowels in a mad rush to cover up and bury evidence. That's what is happening these days right now. Who knows? who knows what, and who could potentially or will likely roll on others in order to save themselves. This is my primary question, asked it last night on the Shad Show. Who will cut a deal? More importantly, who will cut a deal first? Yeah, it's the beginning of the end. It really is. But for whom? Here's the deal. Attorney General William Barr is now the most dangerous man in the United States of America. Listen to how people denigrate him. Listen to how they have to minimize him. Listen to how they utilize every device, every word, phrase, every pejorative in order to derail any future work that he wants to accomplish and to absolutely destroy his credibility and destroy him as a human being. Because here is what an actual Attorney General of the United States sounds like. An Attorney General of the United States says things like, I'm not going to discuss my decision. I will lay it out after the report is out. And a real Attorney General, unlike Jeff Sessions, for example, says, I'm not going to characterize or discuss the contents of the report. This is the first audio cut I have for you. This is Democrat Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland, who is trying to get information out of AG Barr prior to the release of the report a couple of weeks ago. And this is what I call a good Attorney General sticking to his guns.
You sent a letter to the United States Congress that included something which was a principal conclusion, which was not a conclusion reached by the Mueller report. You indicated that they did not exonerate the president. You did. And so I'm asking you whether you agree with Mueller that there were difficult issues of law and fact in making that assessment.
That's not a question I really can answer until I think.
Well, you did it, but you looked at the report, right? And you looked at the evidence of the report, and you made a decision. And you said that the president's not guilty of criminal obstruction of justice. I'm asking you, in your review of the report, did you agree with Mueller that there were difficult issues of law and fact?
I'm going to give my reaction and comments, about the report after the report.
Well, it would have been, but you...
Okay, you have to remember, the report has not been officially... They're trying to pin him down before the report even comes out. He's just relayed a summary.
Put your view of the report out there on this issue of obstruction of justice, right? Nobody asked you to do that.
I didn't put my view of the report.
Well, you put your assessment on, you made a conclusion on the question of obstruction of justice that was not contained in the Mueller report. And I'm simply asking you, when you looked at the evidence, did you agree with Mueller and his team that there were difficult issues of law and fact?
As I say, I am going to explain my decision. Yeah. And to the extent that requires any assessment of the Mueller report, I'm going to do that when the Mueller report is out.
Did your decision require you to look into the intent of the President of the United States with respect to obstruction of justice?
I'm not going to discuss my decision. I will lay it out after the report is out.
Mr. Attorney General, the thing is, you put this out there. I mean, the President went out and tweeted the next day that he was exonerated. That wasn't based on anything in the Mueller report with respect to obstruction of justice. That was based on your assessment. That was on March 24th. And now you won't elaborate at all as to how you reached that conclusion. Because I'm not asking you what's in the Mueller report. I'm asking about your conclusion. Let me ask you this.
Well, it was the conclusion of a number of people, including me, and I obviously am the Attorney General.
Stop. Thank you. Thank you. Someone who stands up to these tards.
It was also the conclusion of the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein.
I understand. No, I've read your letters.
And I will discuss that decision after the report is out.
Did Bob Mueller support your conclusion?
I don't know whether Bob Mueller supported my conclusion.
So in your June 2018 memo, you indicated a president can commit obstruction of justice in the classic sense of sabotaging a proceeding's truth-finding functions. Did you see any evidence in this report about whether or not President Trump committed what you call a classic sense of obstruction of justice?
I'm not going to characterize or discuss the contents of the report. The report will be made public
in reaching your
next week, and I will come up and testify at that point about it.
Right, but the thing about it is, Mr. General, you put your conclusion out there, and now you refuse to talk about any basis of your conclusion. I'm not asking you for what's in the report. I'm asking you how you reached your conclusion. Last question.
Does it matter? Does it matter? The report has not come out yet. You're trying to pin this guy down. It doesn't matter. What matters is the past 2 years, but you're scared. You're scared because this guy revealed to you, because this is, again, before the Mueller report came out. This guy, Barr, has just revealed to you, he's given you a glimpse of the fact that he's not going to skewer Trump. And these guys are scared shitless.
Can you assure us that the key factual evidence relevant to charges of obstruction of justice will be included in the public report?
Can
you assure us that the key factual evidence in the Mueller report related to charges of obstruction of justice will be available in the public report?
I believe it will, and that's one of the reasons why I want to review it after when the redaction team is done making the redactions, to make sure that there's nothing in there that would prevent that.
Okay, so the leftist Democrats and the American media maggots clearly recognize that Attorney General William Barr is a D.C. veteran, and he doesn't buy very many political narratives. He's seen most everything, and he really doesn't seem to be afraid of much. He appears to be primarily interested in the law, and he also happened to say this about 3 weeks ago.
With respect to the word, can I have a minute? I just want to nail down, you used the word spying. About.
Do you remember this? This was glorious. These people are falling all over themselves over one word, spying. Because apparently spying is bad. Spying is bad. We don't spy.
Authorized DOJ investigative activities.
Are you talking about my testimony before the House Appropriations?
Yes.
Okay.
In the entirety of your previous career in the Department of Justice, including as Attorney General, have you ever referred to authorized department investigative activities officially or publicly as spying?
Number one, who cares? Number two, what matter does it make?
I'm not asking for private conversation.
I'm not going to abjure the use of the word spying. I think, my first job was in CIA, and I don't think the word spying has any pejorative connotation at all. To me, the question is always whether or not it's authorized and adequately predicated spying. I think spying is a good English word that, in fact, doesn't have synonyms because it is the broadest word incorporating really all forms of covert intelligence collection. So I'm not going to back off the word spying, except I will say I'm not suggesting any pejorative, and I use it frequently, as do media.
When did you decide to use it? Was it off the cuff in the hearing that day, or did you go into that hearing intending to use the word spying?
It was actually off the cuff, to tell you the truth, and when the
Congressman probably?
Well, from Schatz from Hawaii.
Oh, was here? Shaheen?
No.
Whoever it was, go ahead.
Yeah, when he challenged me and said, you want to change your language, I was actually thinking, like, what's the issue? I don't consider it a pejorative.
What is the issue?
Frankly, we went back and looked at press usage, and up until all the FAW outrage a couple of weeks ago, it's commonly used in the press to refer to authorized activities, such as referring to the FISA court as the spy court.
But it's not commonly used by the department.
What?
It is not commonly used by the department. My time is
commonly used by me.
Stop. It's used by me. I worked for the FBI. I worked pen registers. I did Title IIIs. Sometimes we called it spying.
Thank you.
Okay, I want you to hear this final.
My time is
commonly used by me.
It's commonly used by me. So that was bad, I guess. Right? And of course, there was more that was said in the Senate Judiciary Committee. This is a tete-a-tete. I kind of like this. This is a little tete-a-tete between William Barr and Dianne Feinstein.
You still have a situation where a president essentially tries to change the lawyer's account in order to prevent further criticism of himself.
Well, that's not a crime.
this situation instruct someone to lie?
No, it has to be, well, to be obstruction of justice, the lie has to be tied to impairing the evidence in a particular proceeding.
Yeah, let's talk about, as I know, in terms of crime, means, motive, and opportunity. All those legs have to be present for a crime to occur. Means, motive, and opportunity.
McGahn had already given his evidence.
If you received a letter from Bob Mueller a few days after your March 24th letter, it was clear he had some genuine concerns about what you had said and done to that point. Can we move to another topic?
Yeah, his concerns was he wanted more ad. And I would analogize it to this. After a months-long trial, if I wanted to go out and get out to the public what the verdict was, pending preparation of the full transcript, and I'm out there saying, here's the verdict, and the prosecutor comes up and taps me on the shoulder and says, well, the verdict doesn't really fully capture all my work. How about that great cross-examination I did, or how about that third day of trial where I did that? This doesn't capture everything. My answer to that is I'm not trying to capture everything.
Exactly.
I'm just trying to state the verdict.
Thank you.
An obstruction case typically has two aspects to it. One, there's usually an underlying criminality that's
Let's stop right there.
Yeah.
Was there an underlying crime here?
Thank you, Lindsay.
So usually there is.
Usually. But it's not necessary, but
Right.
the typical case, sort of the paradigmatic case is
Right.
there's an underlying crime, and then the person implicated or people implicated are concerned about that criminality being discovered, take an inherently malignant act, as the Supreme Court has said, to obstruct that investigation.
Do you share my concerns about the FISA warrant process?
Yes.
Do you share my concerns about the counterintelligence investigation, how it was opened and why it was opened?
Yes.
Do you share my concerns that the professional...
Okay, stop right here. Right about this time, many, many Democrats in those chambers, their bowels were, in fact, starting to turn to water.
Lack of professionalism in the Clinton email investigation is something we should all look at?
Yes.
Do you expect to change your mind about the bottom line conclusions of the Mueller report?
No.
Do you know Bob Mueller?
Yes.
Do you trust him?
Yes.
How long have you known him?
30 years, roughly.
You think he had the time he needed?
Yes.
You think he had the money he needed?
Yes.
You think he had the resources he needed?
Yes.
Do you think he did a thorough job?
Yes, and I think he feels he did a thorough job and had adequate evidence to make the calls.
Do you think the president's campaign in 2016 was thoroughly looked at in terms of whether or not they colluded with the Russians?
Yes.
And the answer is no, according to Bob Mueller.
That's right.
Okay, this was sufficient. Just that right there was sufficient to raise Democrat hackles and cause immediate concern, as in, is this guy going to play along or not? Okay, so 3 weeks ago, AG Barr caused sphincters all across D.C. to either slam shut or empty their watery contents when he related the following. And that's this. I think spying on a political campaign is a big deal
for us to be affected by these rulings. I want to go back to your comments about the 4 reasons that you intend to redact portions of the special counsel's report. The fourth one was information that would unduly infringe on the personal privacy and reputational interests of peripheral third parties. Does that mean that you will redact information to protect the reputational interests of the president?
No. I'm talking about people in private life.
Okay.
Not public office holders.
Thank you. News just broke today that you have a special team looking into why the FBI opened an investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 elections.
Here we go.
I wonder if you can share with this committee who's on that team, why you felt a need to form that kind of a team, and what you intend to be the scope of their investigation.
Yeah, as I said in my confirmation hearing...
this is the crux of the biscuit right here.
I am going to be reviewing both the genesis and the conduct of intelligence activities directed at the Trump campaign during 2016. and a lot has already been a lot of this has already been investigated, and a substantial portion of it has been investigated and is being investigated by the Office of Inspector General at the department.
That's coming too.
But one of the things I want to do is pull together all the information from the various investigations that have gone on, including on the Hill and in the department, and see if there are any remaining questions to be addressed.
And can you share with us why you feel a need to do that?
Listen.
Well, for the same reason we're worried about foreign influence in elections. We want to make sure that during an election, I think spying on a political campaign is a big deal. It's a big deal.
Yes.
Generation I grew up in, which was the Vietnam War period, people were all concerned about spying on anti-war people and so forth by the government. And there were a lot of rules put in place to make sure that there's an adequate basis before our law enforcement agencies get involved in political surveillance. I'm not suggesting that those rules were violated, but I think it's important to look at that. And I'm not talking about the FBI necessarily, but intelligence agencies more broadly.
So you're not suggesting, though, that spying occurred?
Oh, wait.
I don't,
wait.
I guess you could, I think spying did occur.
Yes.
Yes, I think spying did occur.
Uh-oh.
Well, let me...
The question is whether it was
predicated,
adequately predicated. And I'm not suggesting it wasn't adequately predicated, but I need to explore that. I think it's my obligation. Congress is usually very concerned about intelligence agencies and law enforcement agencies staying in their proper lane.
And why wouldn't
I want
you?
to make sure that happened. We have a lot of rules about that.
Yes.
And I want to say that I've said I'm reviewing this. I haven't set up a team yet, but I have in mind having some colleagues help me pull all this information together and let me know whether there's some areas that should be looked at. And I also want to make clear this is not launching an investigation of the FBI. Frankly, to the extent there were any issues at the FBI, I do not view it as a problem that's endemic to the FBI. I think there was probably a failure among a group of leaders there.
Thank you. Okay,
the upper
wait,
echelon.
stop. A failure of a group of leaders at the FBI. Jimmy the Leak Comey, did you notice his social media skyrocketed and he got stupid with trees and fields and chirping birds after he found out, you know what? I think William Barr, as Attorney General, might be focusing on my ass.
So I don't like to hear attacks about the FBI because I think the FBI is an outstanding organization, and I think Chris Wray is a great partner for me. I'm very pleased that he's there as the director, and if it becomes necessary to look over some former officials' activities, I expect that I'll be relying heavily on Chris and work closely with him in looking at that information. But that's what I'm doing. I feel I have an obligation to make sure.
Underlying subtext, that's what I'm doing, and you're not going to talk me out of it, and I will not be swayed. That's what I'm doing. Sub-parenthesis, subtext. I'm not Jeff Sessions.
That government power is not abused. I mean, I think that's one of the principal roles of the Attorney General.
I certainly agree. I think we all have an obligation to ensure that government power is not abused. The question I have is what happens when the executive is potentially playing that role.
Okay, this is Shaheen. Do you think she got a phone call after she agreed with William Barr? My answer is, oh, hell yeah.
And that's where it doesn't seem to me there has...
Okay, basically, he said, I think spying did occur. I think spying on a political campaign is a big deal, and I take it as part of my responsibility to find out. Those were the words that loosened thousands of sets of bowels in the Northeast. And with that, I submit the gloves were off. William Barr had to be destroyed by any means necessary or available. It was clear that he was no limp-wristed, wimpy-voiced, diaper-wearing Jeff Sessions, but an actual adult who could think for himself and recognized his duties and responsibilities as Attorney General of the United States. He also knows what he will and will not do, and what is lawfully obligated to do or not do. A.G. William Barr is essentially, for the first time in quite some time, setting behavior parameters for the children.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Attorney General Barr, I wonder if you could tell us about the conversation between yourself and Bob Mueller.
Okay, this is Senator Blumenthal. This is when Senator Blumenthal gets handled like a child.
Shortly after your summary was issued, he called you?
No, I called him.
What prompted you to call him?
The letter.
Your letter? Or his letter?
His letter.
His letter. So you called him.
Yeah.
This is great.
And how long did the conversation last?
By the way, there is not going to be a bottom of the hour break, and we may go into overtime at the top of the hour, just to let you know.
I don't know, maybe 10, 15 minutes. There were multiple witnesses in the room. It was on the speakerphone.
Who was in the room?
Among others, the Deputy Attorney General was in the room.
Anyone else?
Several other people who had been working on the project.
Members of your staff?
Yes, and the deputy staff.
And as best you can recall, in the language that was used, who said what to whom?
Could you remember that? I couldn't.
I said, Bob, what's with the letter? You know, why don't you just pick up the phone and call me if there's an issue? And he said that they were concerned about the way the media was playing this and felt that it was important to get out the summaries, which they felt would put their work in proper context.
Okay, did you see, you understand what Mueller is doing now? Mueller is only concerned about this when the media, who was all, we love you, Bob Mueller, we love you, we've waited for 2 years for you to excoriate the crap of OMB, Orange Man Bad. And now that you haven't played to our wishes and demands, well, you're not our favorite kid anymore. And now Mueller wanted to get his thing out because he was offended that the media doesn't like him anymore.
And avoid some of the confusion that was emerging. And I asked him if he felt that my letter was misleading or inaccurate. And he said no, that the press... he felt that the press...
The letter, Mueller said, the letter was not misleading or inaccurate. He's concerned about how he looks in the press.
Coverage was, and it was, and that a more complete picture of his thoughts and the context and so forth would deal with that. And I suggested that I would rather just get the whole report out than just putting out stuff seriatim and piecemeal. And but I said I would think about it some more. And the next day I put out a letter that made it clear that no one should read the March 24th letter as a summary of the overall report, and that a full account of Bob's Mueller's thinking was going to be in the report and everyone would have access to it.
But there's nothing in Robert Mueller's letter to you about the press. His complaint to you is about your characterization of the report, correct?
Well, the letter speaks for itself.
It does. And in fact, in response to your question, why not just pick up the phone? This letter was an extraordinary act. A career prosecutor rebuking the Attorney General of the United States.
He's not a career prosecutor.
Memorializing in writing, right? I know of no other instance of that happening. Do you?
He's a career director.
I don't consider Bob at this stage a career prosecutor. He's had a career as a prosecutor.
Well,
But he
he's
was
a
the head-
very
he-
eminent
He was the head of the FBI for 12 years.
Yeah, that's not a prosecutor.
He's a career
He's had a
law
long
enforcement
career, yeah.
professional.
Yeah.
Right.
Be accurate.
I know of no other instance of.
But he was also a political appointee, and he was a political appointee with me at the Department of Justice. The letter's a bit snitty, and I think it was probably written by one of his staff people.
Did you make a memorandum?
I
of
love that.
Political appointee with me at the Department
Listen.
of Justice. The letter's a bit snitty, and I think it was probably written by one of his staff people.
Did you make a memorandum of your conversation?
Huh?
This is great.
Did you
Listen to
make a
this.
memorandum?
No, I didn't
Or
make
did
a
anyone else?
memorandum.
This is
What?
great.
Did anyone, either you or anyone on your staff, memorialize your conversation with Robert Mueller?
Yes.
Yes.
Who did that?
There were notes taken of the call.
May we have those notes?
No.
Why not?
Why should you have them?
I'll tell you, we got to end this, but I'm going to write a letter to Mr. Mueller, and I'm going to ask him, is there anything you said about that conversation he disagrees with? And if there is, he
I'm
can come
sorry.
and tell us.
That's great. Lindsey Graham goes on, and then he ends that session right there. But that was a single word from an actual adult in the room. Can we have those notes? No. Then why should you have them? Okay, so hence these unfettered, unreasonable, baseless attacks. Leftist Democrats and the American media maggots, they know exactly what William Barr will do or is already doing. He's going to walk backwards in time to determine how the FISA warrant was acquired, as he rightly should do. Lindsey Graham nails the primary issue here on the Sean Hannity Show. I'm going to play that in a second. As an aside, it's interesting to see how when I was looking for this video, I found it twice, and they were both eliminated. Then I finally found it a third time, and it's still here, but temporarily. I'm wondering why this video is being eliminated from YouTube, because the third time was the charm, and I played hell trying to find this video. So what was terrible about this video, according to YouTube? Is this tete-a-tete between Lindsey Graham and Sean Hannity? Why is this any more closer to the bone than anything before? I don't know.
Joining us now, Chairman of the Judiciary Committee. He led today's hearing, did a phenomenal job. And I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, you and the Attorney General get 1,000. That list that you went down, that's the headline. Right. This is over. He's not changing his mind, and this is all beginning.
Well, to all my friends on the other side, we gave Mueller 2 years to do his job.
Thank you.
He had 19 lawyers. He had $25 million. He interviewed 500 people. He issued 2,000 subpoenas. He had plenty of opportunity without interference. The president gave him 1.5 million documents. Everybody around the president and on the president's campaign testified voluntarily. And here's what we know. There was no conspiracy between the Trump campaign and the Russians at all. The Mueller could not decide, chose not to press forward on obstruction. I always thought the obstruction argument was absurd. It is over. And the reason they're mad at Barr and me is because they didn't get the outcome they want. My friends on the other side want an outcome, and they don't care how they get it.
That deserves this.
Senator, I've known you a long time. I want you to delve into that line of questioning that I played, where you went down your list. FISA abuse, the rigged criminal investigation into Hillary. It was all rigged. She did violate the Espionage Act, 18 U.S.C. 793. There was classified top secret information on that server. She had an intent by deletions, bleach bit, and hammers and pulling SIM cards. The intent was to destroy the evidence. The very thing, that would be obstruction, which the very thing liberals are acting like they care about.
Can you imagine if Trump had done something like that? Can you imagine if anyone on Trump's staff had done something like that? Can you imagine if anyone on Trump's staff had received consideration, you don't have to testify in exchange for, well, they didn't get anything from the people that they gave immunity to, did they?
That would be a slam dunk obstruction case to me. What are your thoughts?
Well, what I tried to show was that when it came to the Trump campaign, we had Bob Mueller, one of the most experienced lawyers, former FBI director, take 2 years, $25 million, 19 lawyers. Everybody in the country believed he was a fair-minded guy, and he reached a conclusion that the left doesn't like. But the verdict is in for Mueller: no collusion, no obstruction. Now, what I tried to show the public was that when it came to Clinton's email investigation, there was no Bob Mueller's involved. There was Strzok and Page, who hated Trump's guts, wanted her to win $100 million to nothing. I want the public to know that the FISA warrant obtained against Carter Page was based on garbage collected by a foreign agent paid for by the Democratic Party.
Fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine. I'll say that until I cack. Fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine. That's why Barr is being fought so hard. That's why Graham is being fought so hard. That is why they're doing everything. They cannot afford the actual information to get out or be leaked.
That is unverified to this day, and I want to find out, did they open up a counterintelligence investigation against President Trump for bad motives? And we're going to get the answers to all those questions.
You know, I think this is very important as well. Okay, so the issue of finding out whether they rigged the Clinton investigation.
Right.
By the way, is that the same time kind of interesting? Where did this originate, this crossfire hurricane? Important questions. Let's talk.
Okay, stop right there. The origin is incredibly important, and Jim Jordan weighs in on this a little bit later. So perhaps the LDAM, the leftist Democrats and the American media maggots, think that instead of, I think spying on a political campaign is a big deal, they believe Attorney General William Barr said essentially, cry havoc and let slip the dogs of war, because make no mistake, this is war. Leftists and Democrats are fighting to ensure that the entire 44th presidency doesn't explode into the face of Barack Hussein Obama, and moreover, that those persons operating the pedals and the levers, such as Hillary Clinton, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, Bruce and Nellie Orr, John Brennan, James Clapper, James Comey, Jimmy the Leak, I like to call him Comey, Andrew McCabe, and many others, aren't themselves placed under indictment or arrest, or perhaps even sentenced to some kind of a federal facility. Because I firmly believe now, as 2 years ago when I made this statement, that what we're seeing is in fact a soft coup, simply not an active utilization of the U.S. military might, against a citizen. It is a soft coup against a citizen of the United States. It was a soft coup against a presidential nominee. It was a soft coup against a president-elect, and it is a continuing soft coup against a sitting president of the United States. The heat is on. The persons I enumerated, they are hearing footsteps, and the stench of fear is thick. Here are a number of revelations recently discovered involving the FBI, the CIA, and all sorts of individuals in the systemic focus on removing Donald Trump by any means necessary, legal or illegal. First, isn't it interesting that this occurs? And when something like this happens, it always, call me wacky, but the timing seems a bit concerning or to me suspicious. NSA recommends dropping controversial mass surveillance program, report says. The National Security Agency has reportedly recommended that the White House abandon a controversial surveillance program that collects vast amounts of information about Americans' phone calls and text messages, claiming the legal and logistical burdens of maintaining it outweigh its benefits to the intelligence community. Why not 2 years ago? Why not 2016? Why not 2015? Why now? This emerged April 18th from the WashingtonFreeBeacon.com. U.S. intelligence, we knew this, we intuited this, did we not? U.S. intelligence institutionally politicized towards Democrats. Former CIA analyst says agencies are dominated by liberals. Imagine that. This is an article by Bill Gertz. The CIA and other U.S. intelligence agencies have become bastions of political liberals, and the pro-Democrat Party views of intelligence personnel have increased. under President Donald Trump, according to a journal article by a former CIA analyst. John Gentry, who spent 12 years as a CIA analyst, criticized former senior intelligence leaders, including CIA Director John Brennan, Director of National Intelligence James Clapper, and former Deputy CIA Director Michael Morrell, along with former analyst Paul Pillar, for breaking decades-long prohibitions of publicly airing their liberal political views in attacking Trump. The institutional bias outlined in a lengthy article in the quarterly International Journal of Intelligence and Counterintelligence risks undermining the role of intelligence in support of government leaders charged with making policy decisions. Gentry stopped short of saying the widespread liberal bias of intelligence officials has influenced intelligence reports and products. However, he concludes bias may have crept into CIA analyses. Facts in evidence. Didn't we already inherently intuit this? I say yes. But wait, wasn't it the leftists, the Democrats, the American media maggots, to include Jimmy the Leak Comey, John Brennan, and James Clapper, who absolutely insisted that the alphabet agencies were entirely apolitical and unbiased? And then we discovered this from the Federalist.com. Headline: Obama's campaign paid $972,000, almost $1 million, $1 million, to law firm that secretly paid Fusion GPS in 2016. Do you remember this? Since April of 2016, Obama's campaign organization has paid nearly $1 million to the law firm that funneled money to Fusion GPS to compile a dossier of unverified allegations against Donald Trump. Money from Obama's campaign, almost $1 million. Nobody mentions that. The American media maggots don't mention that. I remember that, which is why I quote that article right now. We also discovered... This was the 24th or 23rd of April, just late last month. FBI found, you want a pathway? You want a path? You want a track? Here it comes. FBI found Hillary Clinton's emails in Obama White House, former top official says. A former top FBI official said a repository of Hillary Clinton's emails was obtained by the Obama White House. As part of a court-ordered discovery related to Clinton's unauthorized email server, Bill Priestap was asked by conservative watchdog group Judicial Watch, to whom I write checks, by the way, to identify representatives of Clinton, her State Department staff, and government agencies from which email repositories were obtained by the FBI. He divulged a non-exhaustive list, which included the Executive Office of the President, which means Barack Hussein Obama. Stop. Do you doubt for even a nanosecond that Barack Hussein Obama had no idea what was being done to Trump and his campaign by a host of persons and the alphabet agencies? Do you really believe Obama was and is that ignorant of politics? You have to believe it if you're a member of the LDAM. Other people mentioned were former Clinton aides Cheryl Mills, Heather Samuelson, Jacob Sullivan, Justin Cooper, former Clinton information technology staffer Brian Pagliano, the State Department, Secret Service, and Washington-based law firms Williams and Connolly. Priestap answered questions in writing and under oath as part of U.S. District Court Judge Royce Lamberth's ruling earlier this year that discovery could commence examining the former Secretary of State's use of the server, encompassing Obama administration senior State Department officials, lawyers, and Clinton aides, as well as Priestap. Even more important, Judicial Watch shared Priestap's recent testimony on Tuesday at a time when Republican allies of President Trump, as well as Justice Department and its Inspector General, are looking into possible misconduct by top DOJ and FBI officials stemming back to the Obama administration to undermine Trump as a candidate and president. Facts and evidence. This astonishing confirmation made under oath by the FBI shows that the Obama FBI had to go to President Obama's White House office to find emails that Hillary Clinton tried to destroy or hide from the American people, Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton said in a statement. No wonder this is the money quote. No wonder Hillary Clinton has thus far skated. Barack Obama is implicated in her email scheme. Bingo. We also know this from the WashingtonExaminer.com. The DOJ Inspector General is homing in on the FBI's use of the unverified Steele dossier. This was just a story yesterday. Justice Department Inspector General Michael Horowitz is investigating the FBI's reliance on the unverified dossier produced by British ex-spy Christopher Steele in the surveillance of a Trump campaign associate, despite questions about Steele's credibility. Stop. Michael Horowitz plus William Barr equals PSH, which is pants shitting hysteria. Citing unnamed sources, the Wall Street Journal reports Horowitz is homing in on and has been asking witnesses about the FBI's treatment of information provided by Steele, described as a key source who was used to obtain Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, FISA warrants against former Trump foreign policy advisor Carter Page. Stop. I'll say it again. Fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine. When the initial and predicating warrant is bad, everything stemming from it is equally bad. Drops of sweat. Footsteps. And yeah, a lot more underarm deodorant is required. Steele's dossier was funded in part by the Democrat National Committee, the DNC, and Hillary Clinton's 2016 campaign through the Perkins Cole law firm and opposition research group Fusion GPS, which had reached out to and contracted Steele. Now we know from the story I related to you, the Obama campaign contributed almost $1 million, $972,000. The new Wall Street Journal report says the Inspector General's office has been asking why the FBI continued to cite Steele as a credible source in the renewal application. Stop. Okay, this is maybe too deep for everybody, but not really. You don't just lie once. You have to go back every 90 days and update the judge as to what's happening so that you can continue the warrant. So they didn't just lie once. They continued that lie off the back of the Steele dossier. And a specific focus of Horowitz's team is apparently a news report cited extensively in the FISA applications that appears to bolster Steele credibility, which said U.S. intelligence officials were investigating allegations similar to those Steele had raised. That happens to be, by the way, folks, a Yahoo News source. Who knew that Yahoo News held sway over the FBI? As you already knew, you clearly wouldn't want you would not want to be any of Jimmy the Leak Comey's shirts these days. James Comey is in trouble, and he knows it. This is by Kevin Brock. James Comey's planet is getting noticeably warmer. Attorney General William Barr's emissions are the suspected cause. Barr has made plain that he intends to examine carefully how and why Comey, as FBI director, decided that the Bureau should investigate 2 presidential campaigns, and if in doing so, any rules or laws were broken. In light of this, the fired former FBI director apparently has decided that photos of him, as I said before, photos of him on Twitter standing amid tall trees and in the middle of empty country roads, acting all metaphysical, is no longer a sufficient strategy. No, Jimmy the Leak, has realized, probably too late, that he has to try to counter more directly the narrative being set by the unsparing Attorney General, William Barr, whose words in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee last week landed in the Trump opposition world like holy water on Linda Blair. Shrieking heads haven't stopped spinning since. And so we've seen Jimmy the Leak get real busy lately. Like I told you, first he penned a curious op-ed in the New York Times. Then a Times reporter with whom Comey, Jimmy the Leak, has cooperated in the past, wrote a news article exposing an early controversial investigative technique against the Trump campaign in an attempt to get out in front of it. And and excuse it. Next, Jimmy the Leak is scheduled to be encouraged on a friendly cable news town hall. In the op-ed, by the way, Jimmy the Leak trotted out his now familiar St. James shtick, freely pronouncing on the morality of others. He sees himself as a kind of pontiff of the Potomac, working his beads, but comes across more like an unraveling Captain Queeg working his ball bearings. Trust me on this. Jimmy the Leak hears footsteps. James Clapper hears footsteps. This is from the Federalist.com. James Clapper knew there was no evidence of Trump-Russia collusion in 2016. This story occurred late in April, just last month. President Obama's top intelligence official stated categorically that no evidence existed of Trump-Russia collusion. So why did Rosenstein appoint Mueller 2 months later? Long before the special counsel probe ended in confirming that there was no collusion between President Trump and Russia, the U.S. government knew there was no evidence of a vast conspiracy between Trump and a foreign power. Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein announced the appointment of special counsel Robert Mueller to investigate the, quote, ties between President Trump's campaign and Russian officials on May 17th of 2017. President Obama's Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, had access to and was privy to all of the evidence the U.S. government collected since the Russian investigation began in July 2016. From July 2016 until Clapper's appearance on Meet the Press in March 2017, not one shred of evidence linked anyone in Trump's campaign to allegations listed in the Christopher Steele dossier or Trump campaign advisor George Papadopoulos' meeting with Australian diplomat Alexander Downer. Clapper stated to Chuck Todd on NBC's Meet the Press on March 5, 2017, that the National Security Agency, Federal Bureau of Investigation, and Central Intelligence Agency had collected no evidence regarding improper contacts between Trump and Russia. Roll with me here, folks. I'm going somewhere. I'm about to make a whole bunch of points. Speaking of more alphabet agencies, veteran journalist Bob Woodward then enters from stage left. And he's getting into the act. This is from dailycaller.com. Bob Woodward, FBI and CIA handling of Steele dossier, quote, this is a direct quote from him, needs to be investigated. Legendary reporter Bob Woodward said Sunday that the FBI and CIA's reliance on the Steele dossier needs to be investigated now that the Mueller report has undercut many of the salacious documents' claims. Woodward reiterated in an interview with Fox News' Chris Wallace his past statements that the dossier has a lot of garbage in it. Woodward said that he recently learned the CIA included outtakes from the dossier in a draft of the January 2017 Intelligence Community Assessment that laid out Russian interference in the 2016 presidential campaign. Quote, what I found out recently, which was really quite surprising, the dossier, which really has a lot of garbage in it, and Mueller found out that to be the case early in building the Intelligence Community Assessment on Russian interference in an early draft. They actually put the dossier in page 2 in kind of a breakout box. But wait, listen to this. Bob Woodward said, I think it was the CIA pushing this. Real intelligence experts looked at this and said, no, this is not intelligence, this is garbage, and they took it out. Bob Woodward says, I think it was the CIA pushing this. Again, from the dailycaller.com. Peter Strzok suspected CIA was behind inaccurate media leaks. Peter Strzok suspected CIA employees were behind inaccurate leaks to the press. Leaks to the press. Regarding possible Trump campaign contacts with Russia, according to an email the former FBI counterintelligence official sent to colleagues in April of 2017. I'm beginning to think the agency got info a lot earlier than we thought and hasn't shared it completely with us. Might explain all these weird, seemingly incorrect leads all these media folks have. Would also highlight agency as source of some of the leaks, Strzok wrote in an email to FBI colleagues on April 13th of 2017. Okay, so where do we go? Where does this go? And I think mostly, where does this start? Now, I hope I can get this to play because in this cut, Representative Jim Jordan nails
Why do you
this.
care about one and not the other?
It start because you have to go back to the beginning. If something starts on a false foundation, that is a problem. Remember, in May of 17, when Jim Comey gets fired, we deposed Jim Comey. He told us at the time, when he was fired, they had zero evidence. And they've been looking at this for almost a year. Zero evidence of any type of coordination, collusion, conspiracy between the Trump campaign and Russia to impact the election. But what did Jim Comey do when he got fired? He leaked memos that he wrote to the New York Times for what? To manufacture the need for a special counsel. That's what we have to go back and look. And it was all based on
But why can't you do both? I am not rejecting your...
Jim Comey, Jimmy the Leak, is hearing footsteps, and the sweat is running down his 6'8" frame.
Premise.
Right into his butt crack, guaranteed.
I am not arguing back at you about Comey. I'm not, but I'm saying this other stuff matters also.
Because, Chris, the start impacts everything else. You want to know why the president was so upset? Because he didn't do anything wrong. He didn't do it. The start was completely false, completely built on this false premise.
You can't say they didn't do anything wrong. You can say they didn't do anything illegal, and I think it's an important distinction.
Chris, here's what happened here.
Please.
Go clear back to January of 2017 when it's President-elect Trump. Chuck Schumer is on one of the Sunday shows, and he says this. Now, remember, this is Chuck Schumer, the top Democrat in the United States Congress at the time. He says, when you mess with the intelligence community, they have 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you. That is exactly what happened. And that's why what Bill Barr said last week, when he said he's going to go back to the beginning, look at this spying that took place, and get answers, is so important because it is never supposed to work this way.
Jim Jordan, Representative Jim Jordan, said we need to go back and look at how this fake Russia collusion narrative started. The start impacts everything else. Fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine. Of course, Jerry the Hutt Nadler held a vote in the House Judiciary Committee on yesterday, May 8th, which in a completely partisan fashion of 24-16, found Attorney General Barr in contempt of Congress for refusing to hand over the unredacted version of the Mueller report. Now, on its face, that sounds terrible, doesn't it? That sounds heinous, doesn't it? That sounds moronic. Why would Attorney General Barr not comply? He's been handed down. Okay, now, let's understand a couple of things that are involved in this, and I'm going to go into some of these in detail, as I hope you hoped I would, because that's what I do here. President Trump then claimed executive privilege over that redacted report. This is from, this is from the UK Daily Mail. Oh, that's right. I find a lot of my stuff when I want to get a few more facts than local media will give me. I go across the pond to the UK Daily Mail and other outlets. Trump asserts executive privilege to keep full Mueller report secret from Congress as his AG Bill Barr is held in contempt for refusing to hand it over. And these are a bunch of bullet points in the article. House Democrats voted to find Attorney General Bill Barr in contempt of Congress for failing to hand over the material. The vote in the House Judiciary Committee was along partisan lines, 24-16. Stop. Okay, this was a vote in the House Judiciary Committee. This was not a vote in the House. This was a vote in the House Judiciary Committee. Let's make that clear. President Donald Trump then claimed executive privilege over the full unredacted version of special counsel Robert Mueller. But wait, there's more, BZ says. The president has no other option than to make a protective assertion of executive privilege, White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders said. House Judiciary Chairman Jerry the Hutt Nadler slammed the move, calling it a clear escalation in the Trump administration's blanket defiance of Congress. Now, if BZ at this point were continue to say something similar to, but wait, there's more, you would likely think, oh yeah, there's probably more. President Donald Trump on Wednesday claimed executive privilege over the full unredacted version of special counsel. There's more about that, too. Robert Mueller's report, and House Democrats found Attorney General Bill Barr in contempt of Congress. The vote on contempt charges, like I said, was 24 Democrats to 16 Republicans. And now what's going to happen in terms of process, it's going to go before the full House chamber for a vote. And in that chamber, Democrats hold a 38-seat majority. Okay, but wait, there's more. after the full House votes, the issue is expected to end up in the courts. Because the Senate, if it goes to the Senate decides that they'll essentially have a trial. We're not even close to that. But wait. Now, this is all predicated on a falsehood. And I want to make that abundantly clear. There are massive, massive falsehoods in this shit. An offer was already made to the Democrats to view a much less redacted version. And on Twitter today, I put out the photo of 5 pages that the Democrats are bitching about. And you can see, you can't really see the words, but you can see how few redactions there are. I'm going to get into that story in just a moment. An offer was already made to the Democrats to view a much less redacted version. They adamantly refused to even go see that version. This is from Politico. Dems reject Barr's offer to view a less redacted Mueller report. They refused. And yet they refused. Still, Barr is in contempt. The House Judiciary Committee held Barr in contempt. They could have gone over to look at it, but it's Barr's fault that they didn't go do that. Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senate Minority Leader Chucky Schumer are rejecting an offer from Attorney General William Barr to view a significantly less redacted version of Special Counsel Robert Mueller's report, contending that Barr is too severely limiting the number of lawmakers who can view it. Well, would you suspect that there's a reason for that? Well, sure there is, and I'm going to tell you. Given the comprehensive factual findings presented by the special counsel's report, some of which will only be fully understood with access to the redacted material, we cannot agree to the conditions you are placing on our access to the full report, Pelosi, Schumer, and other House and Senate Democrat committee chairs wrote in a letter to Barr this past Friday. Oh, but you had the opportunity. Oh, you still have the opportunity. This is from nationalreview.com. Top Dems now have access to all but 2 full, 7 partial lines of Mueller's obstruction report. Let me read that again. This is what they're objecting to. 2 full lines and 7 partial lines of Mueller's obstruction report. Go to that picture at BZIP on Twitter, and you can see for yourself what was redacted and what wasn't. That sparse amount of black is what they're objecting to. And that's how, that is behind which they're deciding to hold Attorney General William Barr in contempt of Congress. As congressional Democrats prepare to hold Attorney General William Barr in contempt over his supposed lack of transparency, it's worth remembering that he has made available to top Democrats the entirety of Volume 2 of the Mueller report, save for 2 full and 7 partial lines, which were redacted to protect grand jury secrecy in keeping with federal law. BZ, do you know about that federal law? I sure do, and I'm going to give you the statute as well. In order to provide lawmakers with greater transparency into Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation, the Department of Justice placed a less redacted version of his report in a secure room on Capitol Hill. It's in the Capitol building. All they have to do is walk their arses over to see it. And granted access to that room to congressional leaders of both parties, as well as the chairman and ranking members of intelligence and judiciary committees in the House and Senate. Listen to this. As of this writing, not one of the 6 Democrats granted access to what amounts to 99.9% of Volume 2 of the Mueller report, which details the president's behavior as it relates to obstruction of justice, have taken the opportunity to examine it. If they had, they could have viewed the entirety of Mueller's obstruction case against Trump, except for the following 7 redactions, 2 of which are applied to footnotes. Again, go to my Twitter spot at BZEP, at BZEP. You can see the photos right there. And that's what the redactions physically look like. Those black marks are to what Jerry the Hutt Nadler is objecting. It's there for you to look at. I didn't have to go very far to find this stuff. All I had to do is go to nationalreview.com. The pictures, the pretty pictures, are right there. Okay, but there are two very, very important reasons why conditions were placed. The Democrats say Barr's offer, which would allow just 12 senior lawmakers and certain staffers to see the full version of the report, also fails to guarantee lawmakers access to grand jury material. They say they're open to discussing a reasonable accommodation, but that members of investigative committees such as the Judiciary Committee and the Intelligence Committee in each chamber, they require access as well. One very important reason why. Okay. Here's my primary objection to it being, you want to see it? Come to the SCIF. It's in the Capitol building. You guys work in the Capitol building. You go to it. It's not coming to you. You go to it. Two reasons. Number one, once you take that out of a SCIF, now you may not know what a SCIF is. It's an SCIF. SCIF, it's pronounced SCIF. That's called a Sensitive Compartmented Information Facility. It's like a really super secure little room you go into. You can't take your cell phone in there. You can't take big cameras. Can't take anything in. Can't take anything out. Because once they take that out of a SCIF, you and I both know the contents are gonna be leaked by the Demorats, period. End of statement. Number two, I told you about this. Grand jury information cannot be made public. This is a quote from the Criminal Resources Manual from the U.S. Department of Justice. Rule 6E2 prohibits an attorney for the government from disclosing matters occurring before a grand jury. That's funny. Sebastian Gorka, who I kind of dig, addresses that issue right here, as a matter of fact.
Joined this morning by Sebastian Gorka, former deputy assistant to President Trump, national security staff member in the Trump administration, Al Salem, talk show host, syndicated nationwide, commentator on television and radio, and here to talk about largely the campaign strategy for the president in 2020, but also other issues facing the Trump administration. We left off the last segment talking about the deadline facing the Attorney General, but broadly in the past week, the testimony of the Attorney General before the Senate Judiciary Committee, the non-testimony before House, where do you think the issue stands in terms of the administration's point of view?
Well, it's very clear. The fact that Jerry Nadler, who in 1999, I mean, the video is viral if you go on Twitter, was great, demanding that the special report on Bill Clinton not be released because grand jury testimony is confidential, that the people who brought the legislation during the Monica Lewinsky scandal, the Democrats brought that legislation that special counsel reports cannot be released unredacted. The very same people, not the same party, Bill, the same people, Nadler, are now saying, give it to us all.
Oh, yes.
They wrote the law. It would be illegal for the Attorney General Barr to release an unredacted version of the report based upon the law the Democrats initiated during the Monica Lewinsky scandal.
Okay, stop. Don't you think that's glorious? It's kind of like the nuclear effect that Harry Reid started. And the Democrats started that, and it blew up in their faces. And Jerry Nadler started that, and it's blowing up in his face. You can't have it both ways all the time. Democrats, can you? What they do. They're kids. The kids want what they want when they want it.
This is done in bad faith. It's a circus. At the end of the day, those who have clearances, like Jerry Nadler, can go to DOJ. They can read the full report. They can't photograph it. They can't copy it. They have access to it. This is all political circus.
Do you think
it is complete political circus?
It's the preamble for the Judiciary Committee setting up an impeachment proceedings.
They have nothing else. What are they going to campaign on?
Oh, my God, I wish I had the quote. It was on. I was going to think to look to this, but I forgot. Who's the guy that said that Guam is going to turn upside down? Hank Johnson. Hank Johnson let the cat out of the bag either today or yesterday when he said, well, we have to have the complete and total unredacted version of that. Otherwise, how are we going to get impeachment proceedings going? Cat out of the bag. Thanks, Hank. Hank. Dude, I don't think that your brain power could make a little teeny, like a refrigerator light bulb go on.
About 2020. ISIS, the caliphate has been destroyed. We have the strongest economy since 1969. We have the lowest unemployment for women, blacks, Hispanics. Wherever you look, it's an incredible success story. There is this idée fixe, this psychotic demand for impeachment of one of the most successful presidents of the modern age, and they're going after anybody who represents him. I was there in the White House. They did it to me. Now they're doing it with Attorney General Barr. It shows a lack of any campaign that the Democrats can run on. The idea that impeachment will resonate across America, you know as well as I do, Bill, it's a non-starter.
It is a non-starter. Now, Sebastian Gorka went on for another hour or so, and I just don't have the time to do that. But you get the point. It's like I said at the start of the show, footsteps. These assholes hear footsteps. And they're beginning to emit, I should say, a stench. It's the stench of fear, because they can hear the footsteps are getting closer and closer and closer. This is a great audio cut between Representative Jim Jordan and Jerry the Hutt. And it reveals the reason that this is all desired about Barr, and Jerry doesn't really retort anything in response. So basically, okay, Jim Jordan nailed him, right?
I would simply observe that, to his credit, Mr. Jordan has been second to none in asking for
Jerry the Hutt is about to get schooled.
Access to the materials we're asking for the, and I simply ask him, does he still think is he still supporting his own request for that the committee and the Congress be given access to the entire report and the underlying information?
Consistent with the law, and I would ask the chairman. My understanding is Mr. Mueller's going to be here next week. Why are we doing it? You're going to get to ask the guy who wrote the whole darn document. We're all going to get asked him questions. Why don't you hold off on this contempt until at least the guy who wrote the thing spent 22 months and $35 million with a whole bunch of Democrat lawyers putting it together? Why don't you wait and ask him next week before we do this contempt resolution?
I'll answer, essentially because it would be useful to read the material before we have him in front of us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Glad to see that the microphone's working this week.
This is Gates.
My good friend from Georgia just asked the operative question. How can we impeach if we don't get the documents? How can we impeach if we don't get the documents? Ladies and gentlemen, this hearing is not about the Attorney General. It's not about the Mueller report, 92% of which everyone in America has had the opportunity to read. It's not about the fact that even the portions that the American people haven't been able to read, the chairman's been able to go read had he chosen. This is all about impeaching the president. Now, why don't they just say it? Why don't they just jump to the impeachment proceedings like their liberal media overlords are telling them to do? Well, the reason is that the American people don't support impeachment. And it's easy to understand why. They actually went and elected Donald Trump president of the United States. And I don't think people are going to support impeaching a president who's doing so well.
They elected him, warts and all. They knew what he was comprised of. I did. If you were smart, you did. So that's why between then and now, the things that you bring up about Trump, this is the other part that you'll enjoy. Now Trump is bad because he mismanaged all of his businesses. Yeah, he went bankrupt. He's a bad manager. And that's funny because at the beginning of every Apprentice where he was on that television show, he'd say, in the introduction to the show, he'd say, I made some serious errors and I made some mistakes, and everybody in big business does. And if you don't learn from your mistakes, then shame on you. So, Trump has lost dollars. Trump has lost millions of dollars. Well, no shit.
I mean, you got 3.2% growth in the economy. The Trump economy is hot. And the reason we're doing so well is as a consequence of the president's policies. And so at a time when my Democrat colleagues are focused on the next election and not solutions to the problems facing Americans, they can't attack the president's policies because people are doing well. So typically they roll next to identity politics that based on what you look like, who you pray to, or who you love, you can't possibly support Republicans. But African Americans are doing better. Hispanics are doing better. Women are doing better. We are seeing a rising tide that is truly lifting all boats in this country. And so now we have this effort, not to argue with policies, not to typically go to the identity politics that functions as the organizing principle of today's Democratic Party. They have to delegitimize the guy that won, delegitimize the guy that people voted for, but they don't have the guts to do it directly, and so they're going after the Attorney General. Now, the gentleman from Georgia in his last remark said, we are hiding behind the rules. Hiding behind the rules. These are federal laws that dictate what the Attorney General can and cannot do. We're not hiding behind the rules. We just like to follow them.
Thank you, Matt Gaetz. I appreciate that. I appreciate your being candid. Can you imagine being a member of the leftists, Democrats, or the American media maggots today? Tonight, it's 10:20 p.m. on the left coast. Normally I'd be out of here, but I'm devoted to make sure that this information gets out so that people that are listening to it live, they can recommend to people, hey, you want to find out what's actually going on with Barr and the dossier and the Mueller report and contempt of Congress with regard to Barr? Hey, listen to the second hour of this fat fuck's show, and he'll tell you all you need to know with attributions, numerous attributions, and audio cuts about what's really happening. Listen to me in podcast. Recommend it to friends. Can you imagine at 10:20 p.m. on the left coast, 1:20 p.m. on the right coast, east coast, at 1:22 a.m. on the right coast, the east coast? I'll bet that there's a rather significant percentile of these fuckheads that are not sleeping really well right now. Because first, you guys lost the presidency to OMB, Orange Man Bad. Despite the numerous illegal, corrupt tricks you pulled involving the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, and the FISA court. Then the OMB started to do precisely what he said he was going to do. He kept up with his campaign promises. He made 2 SCOTUS appointments. He reduced regulations. He eliminated positions, federal positions, and brought a lot of manufacturing back to the United Snakes of America when Barack Hussein Obama said, those jobs aren't coming back. He has kept us as safe on the border as federal courts will allow. Black and Hispanic unemployment is at its lowest rate in roughly 50 years. The economy is doing very well. Then you banked, you leftists, you L-dammers, then you banked on Robert Mueller coming back with kill orders against Donald John Trump, the guy with a dead orange cat on his head. $25 million, and 2 years later, utilizing an attorney staff comprised of nothing but Democrats themselves, Mueller could not make that conclusion. No connection between Trump-Russia elections and whatnot. No outright charge of obstruction. Not there. Doesn't exist. Okay, so now it's time to attack new Attorney General William Barr because he's making noise like he's going to do what any actual, real, honest-to-God Attorney General of the United States would do. Look into the dossier, the FISA warrant, and spying in general against an American citizen. Yes, the S word, spying. Wait a minute. If I had a producer, this is what you would have heard. Yes, the S word, spying. But, of course, I don't have a producer, and that's not what you heard. Harmeet Dillon wrote this, and I think it was very succinct, and I'd like to quote this for you right now. She wrote, Attorney General William Barr's testimony before the Senate Judiciary Committee on the Department of Justice's investigation into Russian interference with the 2016 election and his refusal to testify before House Judiciary Thursday both revealed much about the new Attorney General and the Democrats who sought to question him. At their heart, clownish performances aside, the hearings confirmed what we already knew. President Trump was legitimately elected despite President Obama's knowledge of Russian interference attempts, and Democrats still can't come to grips with this reality 2.5 years later. And she nails it here, too. Democrats are so afraid of an attorney general finally manifestly willing to do his duty to expose the rot, the corruption, the mendacity, and the betrayals in our law enforcement apparatus working hand in hand with political partisans in the media and in elected government that they are taking ever riskier gambles. It's time to ask these questions. What if powerful people, leftists, Democrats, fail? What if they fall? What if collusion, corruption, and conspiracy between Clinton, Comey, Brennan, Clapper, Strzok, Page, the Orrs, Steele, and many others, what if that occurs? And there's evidence and it's proven. What if it leads, as I fully believe it does, right up and into the Oval Office of 44, Barack Hussein Obama himself? Isn't it odd that we're discovering with each passing day that the very things Democrats are accusing Trump of, they themselves are guilty of? And he isn't. The other important question is, how will this affect Democrats in their 2020 presidential travails? It ain't going to be pretty. I think Creedence Clearwater Revival kind of nailed it. There's a bad moon on the rise.
Monsieur has been locked!
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, thanks for listening to the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show, live and direct right here on the SHR Media Network. You want to contact me, you'll find me on Twitter at bzepp and on my blog, bloviatingzeppelin.net. Thanks to Big Sarge for simulcasting my show. Promotional consideration is by the Lockheed Martin Skunk Works, the Boeing Company, If It Ain't Boeing, I Ain't Going, and, of course, Pratt & Whitney Engines Thrust. You can trust. Tiaras by My Little Pony. Thanks to my personal KC-135 Kettle One refueling team, with whom I shall be consorting in less than an hour. Thank you for being in chat. Thanks for listening live. Thanks to Michael Jones tonight. And thanks for listening in podcast. Have a great weekend. Thanks for taking the time out of your busy day and night to do all of this. God bless. Take care. Each and every one of you be safe. See you next Tuesday, right here in the Saloon.
Everybody quiet down now and get some sleep.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, Mama. Good night, Ben.
Good night, everyone. Good night, Mama. Good night, Daddy.
Good night, children. Good night, Daddy. Good night, Elizabeth.
Good night, John Boy. Good night, Jim Bob. Good night, Jim Bob.
Good night, Jim Bob.
What's going on? I was asleep. What's everybody doing?
Good night,
Good night, Jim Bob.
Go to sleep.
Good night, and good luck.